welcome to the students of Postgraduate Diploma in Pharmaceutical Sales Management program. I would like to introduce a panel of our experts which we have today. Professor Javed Farooqi, who is Professor and Program Coordinator of School of Sciences and of the program Postgraduate Diploma in Pharmaceutical Sales Management. We also have with us Dr. Banu Saidullah. She's also Professor in the School of Sciences. We also have with us Dr. Swati. She's also in the School of Sciences and she would be presenting subject matter on Introduction to Anatomy and Physiology. I am Dr. Rachna Agarwal and I am Assistant Professor in School of Vocational Education and Training. I'm also the Program Coordinator of the PG DPSM program. We would like to begin today with the introduction to this first topic.
Today I'll be dealing with the nervous system. Nervous system is just like the telephone network we have in a city. Here we can see a photograph diagram, a telephone network. Here we can see that the main function of this network is that we get the signals or receive the signals and we send the signals out. So the nerves are also like telephone lines, and in this diagram you can see there is a network of nerves which receive the messages and they send them to the rest of the body and in turn control all of the body functions. Before we start the lecture, I would like you to be familiar with some of the terminologies which will come repeatedly. Neuron is the basic unit of the nervous system. The nerve fibers, they may be either called the axons or the dendrites. The efferent neuron or the sensory neurons. The efferent neuron, the motor neuron. Membrane potential. Now every cell has a charge. The membrane potential is the difference between the charges inside and outside the cell. Depolarization. Whenever the nerve cell gets excited, the nerve cell which is in the resting stage is negative, it becomes positive. This is a depolarized state. And when this negativity changes into positivity, when this positivity changes into negativity, again it becomes repolarized. So we should remember these terms: the membrane potential, depolarization and repolarization. The nervous system also transforms the stimuli into the nerve impulse, and it passes them to a largely organized reception and correlation area for interpretation and then issues orders so that we get an appropriate response. These functions can be broadly divided into the sensory functions, the integrative functions and the motor function. Now what are the sensory functions? The sensory functions are all the functions which we get from the external stimuli. The neurons that carry the sensory information to the brain and the spinal cord are called sensory or efferent neurons. That means all the information that is carried from the periphery to the brain or to the spinal cord includes the sensory function. This is an example of sensory stimulus. The integrative function. Now our brain and the spinal cord just work like a computer. What they do is they collect the information, that is the information they get from the sensory, they analyze it, they store some of the information and then make decisions accordingly. So the functions carried out by interneurons are integration, collection and analyzing. The interneurons make up the vast majority of neurons in the body. This is a photograph of interneurons. The motor functions. Motor functions are the reactions to the external stimuli. The nervous system's motor function involves responding to whatever the brain or the spinal cord has analyzed. The neurons that serve these functions are called motor or efferent. Efferent means that is the information that is going away from the brain. and this carries information out of the brain and the spinal cord to the effector organ. This effector organ can be a gland, heart, or any muscle. This is a typical picture of a motor neuron. Now the signal route, how exactly the signal passes from the sensory to the motor. Efferent or sensory nerves carry impulses or signals from various organs or tissues in the periphery to the brain or the spinal cord. And the efferent carry the impulses from brain and spinal cord to the effective organ. In this diagram we can see this is a finger, and we all know that there are receptors on the skin which are connected to the sensory neuron. This is the sensory neuron. This is the spinal cord and the brain. Here there are interneurons, and from here when the message will be analyzed and collected and stored, this interneuron will pass the information to the motor neuron, which will affect the muscle, and then the muscle will produce a reaction. So the information from the skin receptors goes through the sensory neurons to the brain, and from the brain it comes back to the motor neuron, where to the muscle. So this is the signal route which is being carried out all the time in our body. As you are watching this program, your eyes and ears are sensing. The sensory neurons in your eyes and the ears are hearing and seeing this presentation, and your brain will be collecting and storing the information being carried, and then it will store also. Some of it will get stored, some of it you will lose them, and then when you will write an exam, your muscles will react accordingly. The nervous system can be divided into the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system. The central nervous system in turn can be divided into the brain and the spinal cord. The brain is subdivided into three parts: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. The forebrain is the brain part which is towards the front. The midbrain is the middle part, and the hindbrain is the part which is behind. The forebrain in turn can be divided into cerebral cortex, thalamus, and the hypothalamus. The midbrain into tectum, tegmentum, and the hindbrains to pons, cerebellum, and medulla. The peripheral nervous system is divided into autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. This somatic nervous system, it controls the voluntary actions of a body, whereas the autonomic nervous system, it controls the involuntary actions of the body. In the next presentation, Dr. Bano will be dealing with the heart and the circulatory system, which is governed with the autonomic nervous system. This autonomic system can be divided into the sympathetic nervous system. Now this sympathetic, whenever you are in panic, this sympathetic nervous system acts, and when you are laid back and relaxed, the parasympathetic nervous system. The anatomical structures of the nervous system. Nervous system is made up of brain, the protective coverings of the brain, the bones, the cranial bones, meninges, cerebrospinal fluid, and the cerebral ventricles, and the spinal cord. So we can say that it can be broadly divided into four parts: the brain, the protective coverings of the brain, cerebral ventricles, and the spinal cord. Brain is inside the protective cover of the cranial bones. The human brain has about 100 billions of neurons and 1000 billions of neuroglia. And this brain is the center for registering sensations, correlating them with one another, and also is the center for stored information. The divisions of the brain are the forebrain, midbrain, and the hindbrain. In this diagram, you can see that the forebrain is made up of the cerebrum, which is the part where all the sensory and the voluntary actions are interpreted. The thalamus and the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus, here all the hormones which stimulate the release of pituitary hormones are produced. The midbrain is in the middle of the brain. You cannot see the tectum and the tegmentum in this diagram, and in the hindbrain you have the pons, the medulla oblongata and the cerebrum. The calculating part is done by the cerebral cortex, the balance is done by the hindbrain, and the midbrain is for satiety and consciousness. The main functions of the brain are detection and processing of the sensory information, orientation and control of the muscular movements, and maintenance of the consciousness. So detection and processing of the sensory information is done by the forebrain. The maintenance of consciousness is done by the midbrain, and orientation and control of muscular movement is done by the hindbrain. The protective coverings of the brain. The cranial bones enclose and protect the brains, whereas the vertebral